Ladies and gentlemen, let me ask you one simple question. How many of you have ever felt like you were giving everything, all your heart, all your energy, only to have someone seem distant or even pull away? You've been there, haven't you? You've tried to connect, you've tried to show love, to open your heart, but there's a wall. They seem aloof. They seem like they're not interested. And let me tell you, in that moment, it's easy to think that they don't care, that maybe they're not the right person for you. But let me share a powerful truth. If an avoidant acts like this, they're already in love with you. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can that be true? I feel rejected. I feel like I'm being shut out. And I get it. But let me tell you something. Love isn't always about what you see on the surface. It's deeper. It's more profound than the actions you might be interpreting right now. Sometimes the behavior that feels like rejection is actually a desperate cry for a connection, a plea for you to see them, to understand the depth of their vulnerability and the walls they've spent years building to protect themselves. Do you know why they pull away when you need them most? It's because they're afraid that if they let you in too deeply, you'll leave, afraid that if they give you everything they have, you'll break their heart. And they've been burned before. Maybe it was by someone they loved, or maybe life itself taught them that love hurts. But here's what I want you to understand. That fear is not a sign of weakness. It's the sign of a heart that is already deeply invested, a heart that is just learning how to trust, how to give, and how to receive love in the way you deserve. They don't know how to say it. They don't know how to show it, but the way they care for you, that's love in its rawest form. Pay attention. When they sacrifice their time for you, when they listen to you, even when it's hard for them to be emotionally open, when they show up in moments that matter, that is their love for you, not in grand gestures or words, but in the way they are present for you when it counts. Now, I want you to realize something crucial. The greatest gift you can give someone who struggles with vulnerability is patience and understanding. If you push, if you demand more than they can give, you'll trigger their defense mechanisms. But if you meet them where they are, without judgment, without expectation, that's when you unlock the power of true transformative love. This is not about making excuses for someone's behavior. This is about recognizing the truth of who they are. This is about understanding that love, for an avoidant, is often a battleground, a war between their desire for connection and their fear of being hurt. And the person who can navigate that battleground with empathy and strength becomes the person they will want to fight for, because in their eyes, you are safe. Now, I want you to ask yourself, how much are you willing to lean into that discomfort? How much are you willing to hold space for someone's fear without taking it personally? Because, my friend, if you can do that, if you can show them that you're not going anywhere, that you are a safe harbor for their heart, that's when the magic happens. That's when they'll begin to trust you with their deepest love. But don't expect it to happen overnight. Love, real love, is a journey. It's a process of breaking down walls, of facing fears, and of growing together. And if you're willing to stay the course, if you're willing to be patient with them while they learn, to be vulnerable, you're not just building a relationship, you're building something sacred, something timeless, something that has the power to change both of you for the better. So if an avoidant pulls away from you, if they act like they don't care when you feel like you need them most, don't take it as rejection. Take it as a sign that they are already in love with you. And the love they have for you is too big, too beautiful, too transformative for them to handle just yet. And in that space of understanding, that space of trust, you'll both discover that love is not just about what's easy. Love is about what's real. And if you have the courage to lean into it, to honor it, and to nurture it, you'll see something powerful unfold that can change your life forever. Remember this, love doesn't show up the way we expect it to. It doesn't always speak in words, but if you look closely, if you listen carefully, you'll find that love is speaking to you through their actions. And when you understand that truth, you'll have the power to transform not just this relationship, but every relationship you ever have. So go forward knowing this. If they act like this, they're already in love with you. And love in its deepest form will find its way. Avoidant individuals often find themselves in a constant tug-of-war between their desire for intimacy and their overwhelming fear of vulnerability. At the core of their behavior is a deep-rooted fear of getting hurt. A fear born from past emotional wounds, either from previous relationships or formative experiences in their lives. This fear is not just a fleeting insecurity. It's something they carry with them as a protective mechanism, built over time in response to feelings of rejection, abandonment, or betrayal. For many avoidants, being vulnerable means exposing themselves to the possibility of deep emotional pain, and this is something they desperately want to avoid. The fear of vulnerability, however, isn't always conscious or overt. It often manifests subtly through their actions, mannerisms, and the way they respond to intimacy. An avoidant person may want connection just as much as anyone else, but they often struggle with the idea of giving someone access to their innermost selves. Opening up means relinquishing control over their emotions, and for someone with an avoidant attachment style, control is their greatest defense against being hurt. So, instead of embracing intimacy fully, they may distance themselves, put up walls, or even appear disinterested. It's essential to understand that when an avoidant pulls away or seems emotionally distant, it's not a reflection of their lack of feelings for you. Quite the opposite. It's a sign that their feelings for you are growing too intense, and as a result, they are reacting with fear. Their hearts are telling them that you may be someone they can trust, that this connection could deepen into something more meaningful, but their minds and past experiences are telling them to be cautious, to protect themselves, to hold back. In relationships and avoidance, initial withdrawal can feel like rejection. The more you try to get closer, the more they retreat, and this can be frustrating for someone who is seeking closeness and intimacy. It may lead to confusion because their behavior seems to contradict what their words or intentions might suggest. They may tell you they care, but their actions, being emotionally unavailable or physically distant, seem to say the opposite. And when you're left standing there feeling vulnerable and unsure, you might even wonder if you're the problem. But here's the crucial point. An avoidance tendency to pull away is a defensive mechanism, not an indication of a lack of interest. It's their way of protecting themselves from the potential pain of being hurt. If they've been let down in the past, if they've loved someone only to have that love rejected or betrayed, their heart is telling them that love equals risk, and they'll do everything they can to keep themselves from experiencing that risk again. Their fear isn't directed at you, per se. It's a generalized fear of what vulnerability might bring. For an avoidant, vulnerability feels like a loss of control. It's as though opening up could expose them to a level of emotional exposure that they're not yet ready to handle. Being vulnerable means not knowing how the other person will respond, not being certain if they'll be met with acceptance or rejection. It's the uncertainty that terrifies them. And so, rather than risk being hurt, they retreat into emotional isolation. It's not that they don't want love, it's that they're terrified of the pain that can come with love if things go wrong. When you understand this fear, it becomes easier to see their behavior in a different light. They're not rejecting you. They're rejecting the vulnerability that comes with fully embracing love. The walls they put up are not an indication that they don't care. They're simply trying to shield themselves from the emotional exposure they're not ready to face. This is why when an avoidant seems distant, it's important not to take it personally. It's not a reflection of your worth or the quality of the connection you share. It's a reflection of their own internal struggle. They may want to let you in, they may long for closeness, but they are caught in the crossfire of their own fear and their desire for intimacy. Recognizing this fear opens the door for deeper understanding and compassion. Instead of pushing harder for closeness or retreating in frustration, you can meet them with patience. You can create a space where they feel safe enough to lower their defenses, where they can slowly begin to trust that vulnerability doesn't always lead to hurt. In this way, your love becomes a gentle invitation, not a demand. You don't have to force them to open up. You just have to show them that when they're ready, they have a safe place to land. The key here is realizing that for an avoidant, love and vulnerability are deeply intertwined. Their fear of vulnerability is not an indictment of their capacity to love. In fact, it's often a sign that their love runs deep, so deep that they fear losing it. If you can meet them with understanding, rather than frustration, you'll be able to help them bridge the gap between their desire for connection and their fear of emotional exposure. Avoidant individuals often struggle to articulate what they feel. Words can feel like traps to them, spaces where they might reveal too much, lose control, or expose vulnerabilities they've spent years protecting. So instead of expressing love verbally, they reveal it through their behaviors, small actions that most people overlook but that carry tremendous meaning when you understand how avoidants operate. Their love is subtle, quiet, and often hidden in the spaces between words. When an avoidant person is falling in love, they may not say, "I miss you, I care about you," or "you matter to me." These phrases might feel too vulnerable, too exposing, but their actions begin to shift in ways they may not even consciously realize. They start noticing the little things about you, your preferences, your routines, your values. They may remember details you mentioned only once, like your favorite snack, the way you take your coffee, or how you get anxious in crowded places. These small acts of remembering are their silent expressions of love. Avoidants often love through service, showing up when you least expect it, or helping you in moments they know you're overwhelmed. They might fix something for you, handle a task you've been avoiding, or offer support in practical ways. This is because offering help feels safer than offering emotion. Practicality is a shield. It allows them to demonstrate care without feeling overly exposed. But if you pay attention, you'll see the truth. They don't do these things for everyone. They reserve this level of effort for someone who has already touched their heart. Another powerful indicator is when they make time for you. Avoidants are fiercely protective of their personal space, and they often require solitude to feel balanced. But when they begin to prioritize spending time with you, even if it's just sitting next to you in silence or doing something simple together, that's a profound act of vulnerability for them. Their time is their safe zone, and offering it to you means you've been allowed into a sacred part of their world. Their listening is another subtle but significant action. Avoidants may seem emotionally distant in conversation, but when they're in love, they listen with an attentiveness that goes beyond the surface. They might not always respond deeply or emotionally in the moment, but they store your words, reflect on them later, and sometimes respond through actions rather than direct dialogue. For example, you may tell them you're stressed about work, and instead of giving comforting words, they might show up later with something that helps ease your stress or create a calmer environment. The action becomes the comfort. Even the way they manage conflict reveals their emotional investment. Avoidants typically withdraw during tension because it feels emotionally overwhelming. But when they're in love, they may still pull back, but they won't disappear completely. They'll come back to talk things through, trying, often awkwardly, to understand your perspective. This willingness to return, to attempt resolution, is a deeply meaningful gesture because conflict for avoidance is terrifying. Returning after retreating is their way of saying, I care enough not to lose this. Their attempts at physical closeness are equally telling. An avoidant might not initiate affection constantly, but they may lean into you when they're tired, sit closer than usual, or touch your hand subtly. These gestures, though small, are huge steps for someone who guards their emotional boundaries as a form of survival. Perhaps the most powerful action of all is that they begin letting you into their internal world, even if only in small doses. They may share a bit about their past, tell you something personal they rarely discuss, or open up about a worry or insecurity. The fact that it comes out slowly doesn't mean it lacks depth. It means they trust you enough to lift the veil, inch by inch. So the actions of an avoidant, though quiet and understated, are not accidental. They are the breadcrumbs of their emotional truth. When they cannot say the words, they show them. When they fear vulnerability, they offer presence. When they cannot express emotions directly, they express them indirectly through loyalty, care, effort, and consistency. Their love may be gentle, subtle, or imperfectly expressed, but it is real. And if you watch closely, you'll see that their actions reveal far more than their words ever could. For an avoidant, emotional closeness can feel like a battlefield. They've learned to protect themselves by retreating when things get too intense, and that includes moments when someone else needs them most. But here's the paradox. Even though they might pull away in times of emotional need, an avoidant who truly cares will still show up. It may not do so in the way you expect, but their presence, however subtle, is a profound declaration of their investment in the relationship. The avoidance way of showing up is often understated. You won't always get the grand, sweeping gestures or the outpouring of affection that someone with a secure attachment style might offer. Instead, their support might come in smaller, more nuanced ways that reflect the depth of their emotional commitment, without requiring them to expose too much of themselves too quickly. For instance, they may not be the first to offer comforting words when you're struggling, but you'll find them there, beside you in the middle of the night when you need a practical hand. They'll help you with something that matters to you, fixing something around the house, handling a difficult situation, or stepping in when you're overwhelmed, simply because they care and want to show it, even if they can't express it the way you might want. When an avoidant shows up, it's often their way of saying, I'm here for you, even though they may struggle with vulnerability. It's their way of demonstrating commitment without needing to verbalize their emotional depth, and that in itself is powerful. Many people expect that love must always be shown through words or visible displays of affection, but avoidants teach us that love can be communicated through actions, through the willingness to be present in someone's life, even when it's uncomfortable for them. One of the key things to understand about avoidance is that while they may pull away during moments of emotional intensity, their actions still speak volumes. When an avoidant does show up for you, it is often at a time when you're least expecting it, but also when you need it most. This consistent presence, even in small gestures, is a testament to their love. They may not express it in ways that feel emotionally accessible, but their ability to show up, to offer support when it counts, is a sign that they are emotionally invested in the relationship. This kind of behavior often reflects deep loyalty and care, even if it isn't always recognized for what it is. Sometimes an avoidant will show up not because it's easy, but because they feel compelled to be there for you. They may not want to face their own fears of intimacy or vulnerability, but their love for you overrides that. In these moments, it's important to recognize that their actions are a form of bravery, as they're pushing through their discomfort to offer you something that feels precious to them: presence, care, and support, even when it's not easy for them to provide. Additionally, when an avoidant consistently shows up for you, it often signals that they're beginning to trust you more. Emotional intimacy is terrifying for them, but their actions reflect that they are willing to take the risk. Even if they retreat emotionally or seem distant at times, they will still make themselves available to you when it matters most. This can be something as simple as a text to check in when they know you're having a tough day, or a quiet but steady presence when you're facing a personal challenge. The consistency of an avoidant's presence, though it may not always be vocal or demonstrative, is a quiet promise that they're in this for the long haul. And that reliability, however understated, is something that many people fail to recognize. Instead of looking for overt signs of affection or emotional outpouring, it's essential to look for the small but consistent ways that an avoidant shows they care. This could be them offering to help with a task that's stressing you out, or them simply being there to listen, even when they struggle to share their own emotions. An avoidant's actions may not always come with the same level of emotional intensity as someone who is more comfortable with vulnerability. However, their quiet consistency, their ability to show up for you when it counts, is a powerful form of love. And when you understand this, you'll see that their presence, even if it doesn't feel like the love you expect, is in fact an expression of love that's just as deep, just as meaningful, and just as valuable as any other form of affection. In this way, their presence in your life is a gift, even when it's not expressed in the ways you might imagine. Avoidant individuals often carry a misconception about themselves, that they don't feel deeply, that they are somehow detached from their emotions or incapable of loving with the same intensity as others. But this is far from the truth. Their emotional investment runs deep, sometimes even deeper than those who express affection easily. The difference lies not in the intensity of their feelings, but in how they manage, hide, and regulate those feelings. When an avoidant person is in love, their emotions can feel overwhelming, even frightening. So instead of displaying them openly, they tuck them away, expressing affection through small, thoughtful gestures that reveal how much they care. Their love shows up in the details. They notice the things that make your life easier, the little adjustments they can make to support you, or the quiet ways they can show they're thinking about you. Maybe they remember your preferences, anticipate your needs, or silently take on responsibilities that lighten your load. These things may seem insignificant on the surface, but for an avoidant, these small acts of service or thoughtfulness are profound expressions of love. They're giving you something precious, pieces of their energy, attention, and time, all without drawing attention to themselves. Avoidants also show emotional investment by creating space specifically for you in their life. They guard their routines and independence fiercely, because these things help them feel safe and in control. But when they begin to make room for you, whether that's through adjusting their schedule, sharing parts of their day, or inviting you into the corners of their world that few people get to see, that's a powerful sign of their love. They're letting you into their personal space, both physically and emotionally, even if they're doing it carefully and gradually. These gestures might not be obvious or dramatic, but they represent genuine intimacy. Another subtle sign of an avoidant's emotional investment can be seen in the way they begin to think long-term. They might not openly discuss the future, but you'll see it in their actions. They start including you in plans, routines, or decisions. They might not say, "I see you in my future," but they will naturally begin to integrate you into it. They'll think ahead about things that matter to you, consider your needs when making choices, or quietly adjust their lifestyle to support the connection. They do these things because, in their heart, you've become someone they want to build a life with, even if they're still learning how to verbalize it. Their emotional investment also shows up through their protectiveness. Avoidants are often careful observers. They won't always voice their concerns or offer emotional reassurance in a traditional sense, but you'll notice how they're always aware of your well-being. They may become more attuned to your stresses, more attentive to your moods, or more willing to step in when they see you struggling. Their version of protecting you may be subtle. They might help solve a problem without you asking, offer quiet companionship when you're overwhelmed, or shield you from unnecessary stress. This is their way of caring deeply without exposing themselves emotionally. Another powerful indicator of their emotional investment is their willingness to be uncomfortable for your sake. Avoidants dislike emotional vulnerability and conflict, yet when they love someone, they will sometimes push themselves into these uncomfortable spaces. They may open up about something personal, admit when they're wrong, or attempt to resolve issues, even though it doesn't come naturally to them. These moments, though rare or imperfect, reveal how deeply they care. Overcoming their discomfort requires emotional bravery, a bravery they summon because you matter. Perhaps one of the most significant signs of their deep emotional investment is consistency. They may not always be expressive, but they show up again and again in ways that matter. They remember what's important to you, maintain their connection with you even during difficult moments, and continue choosing the relationship even when their own fears make them want to retreat. That steady presence, quiet, understated, but reliable, is the heartbeat of their love. When you begin to recognize these subtle yet powerful expressions, you'll realize that avoidants don't love any less. They love differently. Their love may be quiet, hidden, or carefully measured, but it is intense, intentional, and rooted in a level of emotional depth they rarely reveal. And when you can see past the surface, their love becomes unmistakable. Avoidant individuals often carry a deep, persistent fear of rejection, one that lives beneath the surface of their interactions, shaping how they behave, how they connect, and how vulnerable they allow themselves to be. This fear is not shallow or fleeting. It is woven into their emotional history, often rooted in experiences where opening up led to disappointment, abandonment, or emotional pain. Because of those painful chapters, they learn to associate vulnerability with danger. And so when they begin to care for someone deeply, their instinct is not to move closer, but to retreat, protecting themselves from the possibility of being hurt again. For avoidants, rejection isn't just an uncomfortable moment. It feels like a threat to their emotional stability. The idea of letting someone in, showing their true feelings, or depending on another person triggers anxiety they struggle to manage. Even the smallest hint of emotional risk can make them pull back, become distant, or appear indifferent. But this distancing is not a reflection of their true feelings. In fact, the more they care, the more afraid they become. Their mind starts imagining all the ways the connection could fall apart. They worry about being judged, misunderstood, or ultimately abandoned. So instead of leaning in, they withdraw, believing it is safer to remain in control of their emotional world rather than surrender it to someone else. This fear of rejection often causes avoidants to misinterpret their own emotions. When they begin to fall in love, they might experience internal tension, an excitement mixed with fear, a sense of closeness paired with an urge to escape. Their emotional system is telling them this matters, but their protective instincts warn this could hurt. That conflict can lead to confusing behaviors. One day, they may seem deeply connected, present, and invested. The next, they may go silent or distant, not because their feelings have changed, but because the fear has surged. They may second-guess themselves, wondering if you truly care, if you could someday leave, or if showing affection might expose them to pain. Avoidants often carry a hidden belief that if someone truly knew them, every insecurity, every mistake, every vulnerability, they would ultimately be rejected. So they hide parts of themselves, hoping to stay one step ahead of anticipated rejection by withdrawing first. Their distance becomes a shield, but ironically, The very behavior they use to protect themselves can create misunderstandings, as their partner may interpret the withdrawal as disinterest instead of fear. Because of this internal fear, avoidants may resist deep conversations or emotional intimacy, especially if they believe the relationship is at risk. They would rather avoid discussing their feelings than risk expressing them and being dismissed. They might change the subject, become quiet, or distract themselves. This avoidance is not about you. It's about the fear of hearing something that could hurt them or confirming a fear they've silently carried. Yet despite all of this, an avoidance fear of rejection reveals something important. They care more than they show. They fear losing you because you matter to them. If you weren't important, there would be no fear. The emotional stakes wouldn't be so high. Their protective behaviors exist because their heart is already involved, even if they struggle to express it. In subtle ways, their fear of rejection actually highlights their emotional investment. They may seek reassurance without asking for it directly, observing your tone, your consistency, your reactions. They may need more time to open up, more repeated experiences of safety. Before they trust that you won't leave over time, you'll notice that when they start to feel truly safe, the fear begins to loosen its grip. They become more open, more communicative, more affectionate. But reaching that point requires patience, consistency, and understanding. When you respond with steadiness rather than pressure, when you show them that their presence matters but their pace is respected, you help their nervous system relax. You become someone they don't have to guard themselves against. And slowly they begin lowering the walls they've spent years building. Their fear of rejection, though challenging, is not a sign of emotional weakness. It's a sign of emotional depth. It reflects how much the connection means to them and how vulnerable love makes them feel. And if you can see past the protective layers, you'll discover a heart that loves intensely, quietly, and with a depth that reveals itself piece by piece, only when it feels truly safe. Growth is rarely comfortable, and for avoidant individuals, emotional growth can feel like walking into a storm without an umbrella. When someone with an avoidant attachment style begins to develop real feelings, love becomes both a beacon and a threat. It calls them forward, promising connection and intimacy, but it also challenges everything they've built to protect themselves, every wall, every coping mechanism, every belief about safety and independence. Their instinct might be to retreat, to pull away when things get too intense, yet the very act of loving someone forces them to confront these internal barriers. It pushes them into a kind of personal evolution they often never expected or prepared for. Avoidants are not shallow or indifferent. They are deeply introspective people who have learned to rely on self-protection as a way of navigating emotional uncertainty. So when love enters their life, it becomes a catalyst for transformation. They begin to feel things they've spent years suppressing, desires for connection, trust, support, and partnership. This awakens something powerful within them, the realization that the walls they've built may keep them safe, but they also keep them from experiencing the depth of love they secretly long for. This internal conflict can be uncomfortable and even frightening, but discomfort is often the birthplace of growth. When avoidants encounter a relationship that feels meaningful, they are confronted with the question, do I retreat to what's familiar, or do I take a risk and grow into something greater? And while they may withdraw temporarily, if they truly care, they start inching forward again. This is because love challenges them to expand beyond their fears. It urges them to stretch into new emotional territory, to develop capacities they've never exercised before: vulnerability, openness, emotional honesty, and reciprocity. This growth doesn't always look pretty. It often shows up through messy, imperfect attempts at communication. They may try to express themselves, stumble over their words, or get frustrated when emotions feel too overwhelming. But every attempt, no matter how awkward, is evidence of progress. It's proof that something inside them is shifting. Their desire to connect becomes stronger than their desire to protect themselves. They start to explore what it means to show affection, to listen more deeply, to respond instead of withdraw. And though this may happen slowly, the movement itself is profound. Another powerful aspect of growth is the way avoidants begin to reevaluate their beliefs about love. For many, their past experiences taught them that love means losing freedom, being judged, or getting hurt. But when they meet someone who offers consistency, emotional safety, and acceptance, these beliefs start to crack. They begin to see that love is not a trap but an opportunity, not an ending but an expansion. This realization can shift their entire worldview. It teaches them that closeness doesn't have to equal pain, that trusting someone doesn't mean losing themselves, and that embracing vulnerability can lead to connection rather than heartbreak. Growth also emerges when avoidants start taking emotional risks, even small ones. They might initiate a conversation, apologize when they usually shut down, or open up about something personal. These moments may seem simple from the outside, but internally they represent enormous strides forward. Each step requires courage because they are not only challenging their fears, but also rewriting their emotional patterns. Love becomes the force that pushes them to break their own cycles. And with each act of courage, something remarkable happens. They begin to discover new dimensions of themselves. They realize they are capable of loving deeply. They learn that they can face vulnerability without falling apart. They see that intimacy, rather than weakening them, can make them stronger. In this way, the relationship becomes a mirror, reflecting back the best parts of them, the parts that were buried beneath fear, but were always waiting to be awakened. Ultimately, love becomes a teacher. It stretches them, it challenges them, it grows them. And in that growth, avoidants begin to tap into levels of connection, trust, and emotional depth they never imagined possible. Love becomes more than a feeling, it becomes a transformative force, one that expands them into a fuller, braver, more open version of themselves. Thank you for listening. Thank you for showing up for your own growth. And most of all, thank you for choosing to understand love not just as a feeling, but as a divine force that shapes us, stretches us, and elevates us. You are part of something powerful, something meaningful, something bigger than fear. Thank you.